Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning, Ayo. And good morning, Rufai.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing?
Morning.
All righty, that's me. All righty, let me tell you all what's happening around the world. Now, Paul Biya will extend his 43-year grip on power as he wins his 8th term as president, securing 53.7% of the controversial vote, according to the Constitutional Council's declaration. Now, following this announcement, a number of people were reportedly shot dead outside opposition candidate Chiroma Bakari's home. Protesters, outraged with the results, clashed with police in the main city of Douala. Now, after hours of silence, Paul Biya thanked his supporters for voting for him once again. Now, at least 3 people, unfortunately, have died in Jamaica and across the Caribbean. 4 others in Haiti, in the Caribbean, have died as the Caribbean braces for the world's most powerful storm this year. Hurricane Melissa is expected to bring life-threatening conditions when the storm's eye makes landfall on the island nation of Jamaica. Forecasters believe it could become the strongest hurricane ever to hit Jamaica, with winds of up to 290 kilometers per hour and as much as 40 inches of rain. Hurricane Melissa was upgraded to a Category 5, that is the maximum strength, by the US-based National Hurricane Center early on Monday. Warnings are also in place for Cuba and the southeastern parts of Bahamas. Finally, US President Donald Trump has signed a rare earths deal with Japan's newly elected Minister Sanae Takaishi. Now, Japanese exports to the US will now face 15% tariffs, which was agreed previously, but only finalized on Tuesday, earlier today. Now, this is down from the 25% that Trump had initially threatened. Now, in exchange, Japan has pledged to invest some $550 billion in the US and to buy more US goods, including key sectors like cars, planes, agriculture, and energy. After Japan, Trump will head over to South Korea, where he will meet the Chinese leader, Xi Jinping. Now, before I come over to my wonderful colleagues for their comments on the World Brief, let's take a look at our newspapers today. As ever, we begin with the front page of This Day. And This Day does lead with reports that Joash Amuputan has said that Nigeria cannot continue to decide election winners. The courts can't continue to decide, stressing that it has to be the true outcome of what happens at the polling units. That's obviously brought very fiery debate at the very beginning of our show today. According to Amuputan, frequent post-election litigations undermine the credibility of the electoral process and erode public confidence in democracy. Well, many other things erode public confidence in democracy in this country. What can we say? Let's move on to this week's edition of The Advocate by Onikepo Braithwaite, which is our legal insight into this day. This week, Onikepo Braithwaite does warn that the proposed Electoral Act amendment shifting the burden of proof in election petitions to INEC could destabilize the process and flood courts with cases. Now, she urges lawmakers to focus on reforms that enhance transparency without weakening INEC's authority or the integrity of Nigeria's elections. So you can see that both This Day and the Legal Insight are speaking on similar stories. Let's move on to the New Telegraph and the Vanguard. We've got a double whammy. Let me move out of the way so we can see both papers. And now both of these papers are looking at Plateau State Governor Caleb Mutfwang, who is facing mounting political pressure amid fresh court rulings and internal party disputes that could threaten his stay in office. Now, according to reports, the tensions have also cast uncertainty over the planned APC and PDP national conventions, with concerns that ongoing legal and political battles may disrupt preparations and deepen divisions within both parties. Now, let's take a look at The Punch. It's also reporting and leading on similar conversations. Now, The Punch this morning says the PDP consensus deal has shattered. That's as former Jigawa State Governor Sule Lamido has rejected Tanimu Turaki as the consensus candidate. So a lot of back and forth going on there. Let's move on to the Daily Sun. Now, today, the Daily Sun's front page just features a story that essentially says that detained IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu has dropped his plan for an open defense in his ongoing trial. He insists that he has no case to answer and that his legal team has told the court that the prosecution have failed to establish any credible evidence linking him to terrorist charges and has ordered, or rather urged, the judge to dismiss the case in its entirety. We'll see what happens there. To the Daily Independent this morning. The Daily Independent does report that drug traffickers, that is their lead story this morning, drug traffickers are increasingly infiltrating Nigeria's courier and logistics services to move illicit substances across the country. Now, according to security sources, the NDLEA has uncovered several cases involving popular delivery companies, prompting tighter monitoring and calls for stricter verification processes within the industry. Let's take a look at today's Guardian. The Guardian does report that from December 1st, 2025, Nigerian air travelers will have to pay an extra $11.50 on every international ticket as a new security levy. It's the lead story on The Guardian this morning. Now, that brings the total security charge to about $31.50 per ticket. Now, this new fee is called the Advanced Passenger Information System Levy. It is expected to generate some $46 million a year for the Civil Aviation Authority. Now, the NCAA says that it's meant to boost airport security and improve border control. But experts are warning that this could push up the already high cost for international travel for Nigerians. Nigerians are actually said to be some of the highest paying consumers when it comes to airfares in Africa. Let's move over to the United Kingdom. We'll take a look at the UK's Guardian. Now, the UK Guardian, on its front page, is saying that UK ministers are warning against scapegoating prison staff over the sex offenders case. We do know that 41-year-old Hadush Kabatu, who was convicted of sexual assault of a 14-year-old girl and another woman, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison, but he was supposed to have been released and deported immediately. He was mistakenly released, and then he was able to travel throughout the United Kingdom southwards to London, which is where he was eventually apprehended on Sunday. Now, leaders say that staff shortages, overcrowding, and underfunding are to blame for these systemic failures in monitoring high-risk offenders, and it's not actually individual negligence to be blamed. Now, the warning comes amid growing public outrage and calls for accountability within the justice system. Finally, we've got one more UK paper. Let's take a look at the Times this morning. Now, this is what caught my eye. Small boat migrants to be housed in barracks and no longer hotels. This is the new plan from the government to put migrants who arrive on boats in military barracks and move away, essentially phasing out, putting them into hotels, which had been quite controversial over the course of the last few years. Now, these barracks are supposed to be built in Scotland and in southern England, and they're being prepared to host up to 10,000 migrants as part of efforts to cut costs and address public criticism over hotel spending. However, rights groups have said that they are concerned that these plans could worsen living conditions for asylum seekers. But as it stands in the United Kingdom, people don't care when it comes to housing asylum seekers. So those are your papers as well as your World Brief. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, Femi, today Africa is crying because we have two men that think the will, their own personal will, is more than the will of the people. I'm talking of Alassane Ouattara and the president of Cameroon, Paul Biya, who, by the way, hardly stays in the country, lives in a hotel, I think it's a Continental Hotel in Geneva, and he comes from time to time to come and campaign because of ill health. Who, by the way, in the first 36 years in power, he spent about 4.5 years abroad. Yeah. And every year, he spends well over maybe 50 to 100 days, depending, out of the country. In the case of Laurent Gbagbo, this was the same person everybody spoke up for. I mean, Alassane Ouattara, this was the same person everybody spoke up for when he had the squabble with Laurent Gbagbo. To the extent that, everybody felt Alassane was cheated. Everything had not gone well for Alassane.
Yes.
But Alassane got into power because all his successors have one way or the other died. Some people insinuate that he might have a hand in that. We don't know, but we can't substantiate that. Because the likes of Hamid Bakayoko and other people that are supposed to succeed him die, he keeps staying on the power. So he's done going to 20 years now. In the case of Paul Biya, it's even more interesting. People say Paul Biya has been over 42 years in power. Scratch that. He's been in the circle of power for 63 years, actually. He came back from France as a young person, and he became secretary of the party under Ahidjo. And he did that around 64 or 65. Yeah. That position he had held until Ahidjo said, let me step aside for him so that I can come in. Because then The Christian sentiment in the South was loud because Ahijo was from Garwa. And a lot of people were saying, no, we must have a Christian person. It was based on that sentiment. So you can see how religious sentiment destroys a country. Then he brought Paul Biya, a Catholic from the South. Is there anything Catholic about Paul Biya's values? No. It's an aberration to Catholicism. Staying tight in power, killing people, just like he did in a phantom coup he planned in the 80s to kill all his rivals. In fact, Paul Biya is an aberration to the Catholic Church.
Yes.
And that's the tale of Africa. We just pray. That's never going to be the lot of Nigeria. We pray. That's never going to be. And we would like to call on African leaders to please be cautious, because we can't run a continent this way. So today is another sad day for Africa.
Very sad. And to be fair, it's not just Africa, because where systems allow, we will have sit-tight presidents. President Donald Trump himself has said that he has not ruled out the idea of a third term, whether he said it jokingly or seriously.
Yeah.
But the truth is that where you don't have a system, strong systems and institutions, you will have sit-tight leaders. And that is one of the biggest challenges we have on the African continent. I recall that when we had the coups in West Africa, along the Sahel, the ECOWAS had come out strongly. And when we were speaking at that time, Adefemi, we were talked about democratic coups. In these instances where we have sit-tight leaders, or we have leaders who, they overtake the rules of the people and just hijack the electoral process, as we've seen in some African countries. And so when you look at how to strengthen democracies, you talk about, strengthening the legislature, strengthening the legal process, strengthening all these checks and balances. But in a case where these arms are compromised themselves, then regional bodies like ECOWAS must speak up and speak out against injustices like this in these states. So whether it be AU, ECOWAS, or other regional bodies, we must also take a hard stance in the same way that we take against coups, against democratic processes that have been hijacked, and the will of the people isn't paramount, especially in areas where even the people then die for protest, as we've seen in Cameroon. It's a very unfortunate situation, but Africa must begin to look inwards to see how we as a collective will speak up against undemocratic actions, in countries like this, whether through sanctions, whether through, coming together. It's not just coups that are a threat to democracies in Africa. Sit-tight leadership in quasi-dictatorship is also a big challenge. But like I said, if institutions are not strong enough, it will enable sit-tight or forever, presidency. Now, moving away from Cameroon now to Nigeria, the newspaper headlines, two areas I want to just touch on very quickly this morning. First of all, the headline around the aviation sector. This highlights The Guardian highlights a news report, actually, by the Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development. I'm not sure if it's contained in this report, but Daily Post had the report about introducing a Fly Nigerian Act, saying that all government officials and public service, whether House of Representatives members, would be forced or mandated to use local airlines when they are going on official assignments. And I think that's a good one by the Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development. But again, look at the cost come December, 30 December, we're looking at tourism. We must also find a way to make it affordable for Nigerians home and abroad to be able to fly around. Finally, my take would be on Dr. Christopher Kolade, who will be laid to rest today. Yes. I've wanted to pay tribute to this, to this statesman. The tribute, I think, is window story of this day newspaper. Yes. That talks about the team that President Tinubu leading the tributes for this icon, this great man. Let me tell you the words of, his friend, Emeka Anyoko, who says, an Iroko in his limited forest. He was an Iroko in limited forest of public servants. Today, when we look at finding public servants who can be men of integrity, men who live by what they say and by convictions and values, this was that kind of man. On a lighter note, I spoke to one of his close family members who had talked about his love. He was the son of an Anglican missionary. Until his death, he was very active as an organist in his local church. He was still very active, just giving back to society through his foundations. And so today, we take some time out to really celebrate the life of a great man, and hopefully that other younger Nigerians can study his life and emulate the character of such a man like this. Rest in peace, Dr. Christopher Kolade.
In the early 90s, there was this wave of democratization in Africa, the assumption, pervasive assumption that democracy is the better way to go after what we have seen in the 70s and 80s of authoritarianism, of the belief that, the rule of one man was possible. And then you have this wave of democratization across Africa. But unfortunately, in the 2000s and most recently, what we have had in Africa is democracy in retreat. And it has taken two forms. Either in terms of military intervention, as you have had in Mali, in Chad, in Gabon, in Guinea, and also in other parts of Africa, Niger, Chad, are part of that list. Or in terms of the continuation of the tradition of Sithitism, as we have seen in Equatorial Guinea, as we have seen in Uganda, Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, all of these places where you have presidents, heads of state who want to die in office. Now, as to the specific example of Paul Biya, he has been in power as an elected president since 1982. He is the oldest head of state in the world. Now, he has forced his way to get an 8th term. He campaigned only once physically. At other times, effigies represented him, as effigies also became the political candidates in Uganda representing Yoweri Museveni. The election in Uganda is on January 15, 16, 2026. You can be sure Yoweri Museveni will say, without him, Uganda cannot move forward. So it's a tragedy for the people of Cameroon. Our fear is that, one, there's already protest that has led to the death of 4 persons. Now there's tension in the far north with Boko Haram. The Anglophone region is also problematic. You have the opposition leader, Chiroma Bakari, saying that he will not accept the outcome of the election. But Bakari, Chiroma himself, from Garua, like Amadou Ahijo, he's complicit in all of this. He was communications minister for 10 years, from 2009 to 2019. So he himself, in fact, helped to create the Biya monster. But what happens, the big question, in my view, is after Paul Biya, whether he lives till 100 and has his way, or he dies in his office, what will happen in Cameroon after Paul Biya? That is what, Africa must worry about. And I have suggested in my column today, back page of this day, that in fact, Nigeria should show leadership by not attending his inauguration. And that African Union and ECOWAS should condemn the rape of democracy, the theft, as Bakari says, that we have seen in Cameroon. As for Cote d'Ivoire, Alassane Ouattara, a man very enlightened who has been World Bank staff and all that, became president in 2011. Well, he too has behaved after a fashion like other African leaders. And he now has a 4th term. After stopping Laurent Gbagbo from running, after stopping Tidjane Thiam on the question of nationality from running. And then, the other people who ran with him, the billionaire Ceylon, he got 3.09%. Mrs. Gbagbo, who was also allowed to run, got just 2.45% of the votes. And he has over 80% of the votes. So this is again about the rape of democracy. And it's the people of Cote d'Ivoire that we pity. As for Donald Trump, everything is about Donald Trump. Now, he's in Asia. He gave a condition, 24 hours condition, that he will be there for only 24 hours to attend the ASEAN summit, annual summit, where he said he was saving lives and ensuring peace between Cambodia and Thailand. Now, Thailand is enthusiastic, Cambodia is not so enthusiastic. Then he left and went to Japan, where he says he has now signed a rare earth minerals deal with Japan, and is lovey-dovey with Takeshi, the female prime minister of Japan. Again, it's all about Donald Trump, saying he's making peace, he's making deals. However, it is China who has 90% of the rare earth minerals in the world, used for aviation technology, for automotive engineering, and all of that. He's going to meet with Xi Jinping, we're told, on Thursday in South Korea.
That's correct.
And the
yes.
issue will be principally about rare earth material, and we should watch out for that. It will be about TikTok. We should watch out for that. It will be about soybeans, agriculture, and then, of course, the trade deal between both countries, which trade officials had said they had worked out a framework for in Malaysia. As for Jamaica, it's unfortunate, this conflict between man and nature. Hurricane Melissa is said to be the strongest storm this year. And for Jamaica, the strongest since 1851, when, recording of, this natural disaster began. The people have been advised to move location, to leave the islands, the low-lying areas. I hope they will listen. But we're told 4 days of rain, 40 inches, and that this may be a very destructive, and frightening development in the Caribbean. Already 4 persons have died in Haiti, Dominican Islands, and also in Jamaica. We can only pray for the people of Jamaica and call on the international community to support them when the storm, Hurricane Melissa, makes its landfall today, Tuesday.
Thank you, Dr. Ruben.
All right. Thank you so much, Adefemi. Look forward to seeing you again tomorrow to brighten our screen.
Hey.